What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk for a little bit about the Utah Jazz. There may be no franchise that's undergone a bigger transformation over the last 18 months than Utah. It started off when they traded away their two longtime franchise cornerstones in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. Moves that needed to happen. It was clear that they weren't going to find a way to win a championship with that duo, with the supporting cast they had around them. They needed to head to a rebuild, and I gotta give a lot of credit to Utah, and I have in the past. It's not easy to make that decision to trade away a young rising star in Donovan Mitchell, who you drafted, Rudy Gobert, who won multiple depoys for you, two of the better players you've had in your franchise history. It's not easy to make the decision to move on from them, and a lot of franchises probably would have kept trying to run them together over and over again until one of them demanded to be traded. Instead, they realized, hey, it's the end of the road for this duo, and they decided to move off of them while they both still had really high value, and that resulted in them getting a ridiculous amount of assets in return for their two stars. Danny Ainge deserves a lot of credit for that, and in the first season, we saw some of the fruits of those deals. Lauri Markkanen, after coming over from Cleveland, starting off in Chicago, and never really finding his footing that much, became an all-star. You had a number of other young players kind of step up. Role players like a Jordan Clarkson or Kelly Olynyk kind of found their footing and had some of their better seasons. Walker Kessler was a high-level rim protector as a rookie, one of the guys that they got in that Rudy Gobert trade, and it resulted in them starting off really hot to begin the season, and towards the end of the year, they eventually fell out of the play-in race due to some injuries, and especially post Mike Conley trade when they didn't have a reliable point guard. But for a majority of the year, they were in the thick of the play-in race. So coming into this season, because of the fall off towards the end of the year and the fact that they really don't have a lot of incentive to win quite yet, still in the early stages of the rebuild, I figured the Jazz would probably again be one of the teams towards the bottom of the Western Conference. Plus, the rest of the conference got a lot better, and I feel like the Jazz, for the most part, just stayed the same, other than drafting some young guys who I didn't think were going to make crazy impacts in their first season. I thought they could be good, but overall, it felt like just another developmental year for Utah, and instead, they're currently the hottest team in the league, and I don't think anybody realizes how much they're currently destroying the NBA. So you know me, I'm going to be the one to talk about it. Last night, the Jazz played the Indiana Pacers and destroyed them, 132-105, and the game wasn't even that close. Like, I think the score makes it look even closer than it was. The game was pretty much never in doubt, and yeah, the Pacers were without Bruce Brown, Aaron Nesmith, and Tyrese Halliburton, and if this Pacers team was without Tyrese, they pretty often get destroyed, but even still, if you want to be a good team, you got to blow out the lesser squads, and the Jazz did exactly that. Game was never in doubt. Lauri Markkanen, 32 points, 10 boards, 3 assists on 67% shooting in just 29 minutes. Sexton also had 30 points to go with 5 dimes in 24 minutes. Clarkson had 17, 3, 2, and 2. Keyonte George had 19 and 5. John Collins had 10 and 6. Simone Fontecchio had 8, 4, and 2. Chris Dunn had 4, 2, 6, 2, and 1. It was impressive, and it's become the norm for the Utah Jazz, where you've got these big performances, typically from Lauri Markkanen and Collin Sexton as of late, a lot of players that step up behind them, and they just find ways to get wins. They started this season 7-16, but over their last 19 games, they're 15-4. They're the hottest team in the NBA. Nobody has more wins over that stretch. And again, nobody's talking about it. A lot of their wins are also really good. They've got wins over New York, Miami, Dallas, Philly, Milwaukee, Denver, and the Lakers. They just beat this Pacers team, which also was without Tyrese Halliburton, but overall are a good team. The only 4 losses they've had over this stretch have come against solidified playoff teams: the Kings, the Pelicans, the Cavs, and the Celtics. Everybody else they're beating, and a number of those teams they're beating by a pretty substantial margin. They're also destroying the teams they're supposed to for the most part. The Jazz are on fire. Again, like I said, best record out of anybody over their last 19 games, 9th best defense over that stretch, and the 5th best offensive rating as well in that period. And they've managed to push their way again from 7-16 all the way up to the 9th seed in the Western Conference. They're now ahead of the Warriors, the Rockets, and the Lakers, while being just half a game back of the 8-seeded Phoenix Suns and just 2.5 games back of the 5-seeded Sacramento Kings. It's crazy. If I told you those things, that the Jazz were above 500 at this point, that they were ahead of the Warriors, the Lakers, the Rockets, barely behind the Phoenix Suns, and if they won a few more games, they could be one of the top 6 seeds. They could be outside of the play-in even in the playoffs. If you give them a few more games, if I told you all that was going to be true at the halfway mark of the season, you probably would have called me crazy. I would have called you crazy if you told me that, because while I like what the Jazz are building here, I think they've got a special thing going, I didn't think this was going to be one of the seasons where they showed it that much. I thought it was another developmental year where Lauri looks great. You get great play from like Keyonte George and Taylor Hendricks, who they drafted top 10 amongst some other guys. They probably were on the deadline trade off some veterans, and they still could do that. But up to this point, they've just been a way better basketball team, especially over this recent stretch, than I was expecting. So let's talk about why they're so good. It begins with Lauri Markkanen, who's again an all-star and all-NBA caliber player, and seems like he's going to be for a very long time. He's finally found a role here in Utah. He was great last season, and he's doing a lot of the similar stuff again. 24 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, while shooting just a tick under 50, 40, 90, putting up 50, 39, 89 splits. And by the end of the season, with the way he's continuously getting better and better and picking up steam, I wouldn't be surprised if Lauri is a 25 point per game, 50, 40, 90 guy at the end of the year, which is just completely absurd. He's one of the league's most efficient scorers, one of the best offensive weapons in the NBA, one of the league's best volume 3-point shooters. He's shooting 40% from 3 nearly on over 7 attempts per game, which is absurd. He's a monster. I never saw this coming. When he came over from Cleveland, he began in Chicago, showed some flashes, and Cleveland became more of a role player. When he got here, I thought he could have a bit of a breakout season. Utah could maybe be the spot for him, but I didn't expect him to turn into this type of player last season. This year, I figured he'd carry it over, but I'm sure there were some people that were doubters. He silenced any doubters that I'm sure he had out there. He is a monster. There's a reason why every single fan is clamoring for their team to trade for him when it became rumored that he might be attainable into the trade market, although with the recent success the Jazz are having with the way he's playing, I'm not sure if that's even possible anymore because Lauri is so good on one of the best value contracts in the NBA, a 7-footer that can destroy you offensively from anywhere on the court, one of the league's most versatile weapons. And if he was traded, doesn't matter where he would end up, he would be a perfect fit. But because of all that, because of the contract he's on, the fact that he's young enough to stay with this Jazz core going forward, I'd be stunned if they trade Lauri Markkanen, and for good reason. You don't find players this good very often. The fact that they got one immediately after trading away their 2 previous stars is huge for this team. It's a big boost to rebuilds when you can get a star caliber player in that first big move. I talk about the Thunder a lot because I'm a fan of them, but getting Shea was huge for our rebuild. The Jazz managing to get Lauri Markkanen, similar to also how the Pacers got Tyrese Halliburton, getting that new core star at the beginning of your rebuild is huge for your progress and allows you to skip a lot of the necessary steps that other teams go through. But I'm sure you know how good Lauri Markkanen is. One guy who I think deserves a lot more credit for what the Jazz have been doing. In fact, he might be the biggest catalyst for their success recently, and that's Collin Sexton. He's been amazing for them this season, really, ever since he got put into the starting lineup, which coincidentally happened right at the beginning of this 15-4 stretch they're on. Over the last 19 games, Collin Sexton has been a consistent starter, and he has thrived in that role, putting up 22 points per game, 2.6 rebounds, and 5 dimes while shooting 52% from the field, 41% from deep, and 91% from the line. He's been a 20-5 guy while shooting 50, 40, 90. He's been ridiculous. And last season wasn't a great year for him. He wasn't able to stay on the court too much. He was one of the biggest pieces, maybe the single biggest piece in that Donovan Mitchell deal as a former 24 point per game scorer for the Cavs on pretty good efficiency. He was still relatively young, and it felt like in a new spot in Utah, he could really thrive as one of their new lead guards. However, just didn't have the best year, was dealing with some injuries last season, but this season, he's found his footing, and as of late as a starter, he's become the player they were looking for and feels like he could be a long-term solution for them at one of these guard spots. He's a volume scorer doing it on high level efficiency, and has given Lauri Markkanen a great secondary guy to go alongside him, just giving him another player to play off of, take some of the pressure off Lauri. He's really been the reason why they've been so successful as of late. The second you put him in the starting lineup and give him a bigger role, you find a bunch of success. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. Sexton has been huge, and not enough people are talking about just how good he's been. Beyond those guys, it's just an incredibly deep team. They have a bunch of role players who perfectly complement these 2 head guys at the moment. Guys like Jordan Clarkson, who's struggling with his efficiency this season, but he's been better recently in his bench role and is still giving them 18 a night. John Collins has refound his 3-point shot as a starter for Utah and is giving them 14 points per game a night on pretty solid efficiency. Keyonte George has been really solid as a rookie for them and is making more and more strides, giving them 11 and 5, and it feels like as of late, he's been being a lot better in terms of his efficiency. Walker Kessler, still a really high level rim protector for them, giving them 2.5 blocks per game as a second-year player. Simone Fontecchio has started quite a bit and has been really effective, giving them 9 points per game while shooting 39% from deep. It's so funny. Every single time a team plays the Jazz and Fontecchio starts lighting them up, they get super confused, but teams are going to learn very quickly. Kelly Olynyk is giving them a very efficient 8, 5, and 5 per game. One of the most underrated backup bigs in the league, really solid as a playmaker and as a floor spacer. Ochai Agbaji isn't doing a ton in terms of volume, but he's giving them a really solid 6 points per game with some pretty solid defense. Chris Dunn also been really solid defensively, found a new home here in Utah after years of bouncing around the league, and it seems like this is a spot for him, giving Utah 5, 3, and 4 per game with, again, that really solid defense. It's just a team with a ton of options. They play great team basketball, have a lot of size, which makes scoring against them really difficult. One of the reasons why their defense has leveled up, and stopping them consistently is a really difficult task when you have Sexton and Markkanen scoring as efficiently as they are. All these shooters around them, guys that can create their own shot as well, especially when this team is being coached by one of the league's top young minds in Will Hardy. He has been fantastic as the Jazz head coach. Last season, they were not supposed to be as good as they were. And this season, again, not supposed to be having this type of success in year 2 of the rebuild, but they are. A lot of it is because of Will Hardy. The reason why Lauri Markkanen has been so featured in the first 2 years in Utah is because he saw him in FIBA play and said, why aren't teams doing that with Lauri? Let him kind of run the system, let him be the focus of the offense and see what he can do. And you know what he's done? He's become an all-star, all-NBA caliber player. Will Hardy is really good at putting his players in a position to succeed. He rewards guys that play hard, gives them more minutes. He just seems like a coach that is really well liked by his guys and has done a fantastic job of taking a young team that people didn't really expect much of, getting them to buy into a system and found a way to maximize their talents. It's a hard thing to do, especially as one of the youngest head coaches in the league, but he's done so. They found a coach that they can have for a really long time, a coach of the year caliber guy. It's been a fantastic start to their rebuild. I did not expect them to be this good this season, not even close. And if they make the playoffs, that would be absurd. Before the season, was saying, oh, there's like 11, 12-ish teams that can make it into the playoffs. The Jazz were one of those teams that I completely counted out. But right now, the way that they're playing with how hot they are, they're in the play-in race, and I wouldn't want to face them if I'm another team in that play-in race at the moment. They're trying to knock off teams that had championship aspirations, prevent them from even getting into the play-in. They're playing spoiler. A lot of those top teams don't want the Jazz there, but they don't really care. They're just going to continue to find ways to win and make teams confused in the process. A lot of fan bases out there probably aren't expecting to get destroyed when they play the Utah Jazz, but right now, you probably should. Now, surrounding all this success, there have been some trade rumors. A lot of stuff popped up about Lauri Markkanen earlier in the season when they were struggling because they're not a championship contender necessarily. He's going into the last year of his deal next season. And, you know, maybe the Jazz do want to bottom out. They want to get some top prospects before fully committing to Lauri as their star, which will probably get them kind of more towards that middle of the pack, rather than giving them a chance to maximize with lottery talents. But they also have a ton of picks, and you, again, like I said earlier, don't find a guy of Lauri's caliber very often. So I'd be pretty surprised if they end up trading Lauri Markkanen. I'd be pretty surprised if they substantially broke up this group in any way. I could see them maybe dealing a veteran piece like a Kelly Olynyk or a Jordan Clarkson or maybe a Taylor Horton-Tucker, who has stopped playing, and ever since he's been getting DNP coaches' decisions, they've been balling, so maybe they just need him on the bench there. But I wouldn't be surprised if they trade some of those older veteran guys. I think Clarkson's like on an expiring contract, for example, just to get some assets back, you know, continue to build up this pool that Danny Ainge has done a great job of accumulating so far. And that's a big thing for them too. Like, they, beyond all the young talent they have right now, the way that they're playing, the fact that they're way ahead of schedule, have a ton of assets for the future. A number of first-round picks from the Timberwolves and the Cavaliers. They could get more from some of those veteran guys. They've got big contracts like a John Collins, for example. Maybe Collin Sexton doesn't quite play up to this level, or maybe he rehabs some of his trade value and you flip him in a deal later alongside a bunch of first-round picks to bring in a superstar caliber player to Utah alongside Lauri Markkanen. Danny Ainge is at the helm, who's a really good GM. He has been for a long time. They've still got young players who I think have a ton of potential, like Taylor Hendricks, who hasn't played much, but I'm still very high on him. Bryce Sensabaugh, I like a lot too, who they got in this past year's draft. I'm super high on Keyonte George. I've made that known on this channel. I think he could be an all-star caliber guard someday. There's just so much to love about what the Jazz are doing right now as one of the hottest teams in the league, but it's only the beginning. They've got so many assets to upgrade in the future. There's so much room for this team to grow as a young core with a great young head coach, Danny Ainge at the helm. The Jazz are just in one of the best spots out of any NBA team right now. There's so many different ways they can go, and I don't think any of them are the wrong direction. So pretty much nobody's talking about it, but the Jazz are destroying everybody. They're really well set up for the future. I'm excited to see what they do going down the line. Excited to see what they do at the trade deadline. Do they deal off some pieces? Do they maybe buy in a little bit to what they've been doing so far, the success? Let me know what you think about this Utah Jazz team. How good do you think Lauri can be? Do you think Sexton can maybe be a future all-star alongside him? What young pieces are you high on? Yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on this Jazz team. I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I'll see y'all later. Real one, safe back.